The stone breathes cold here. It is not the cold of winter wind, nor the chill that creeps beneath cloaks on frostbitten fields. It is older, deeper, a cold that lives in the marrow of the walls themselves, born from centuries of damp iron and unspoken truths. The underbelly of the castle has no sunlight to soften its edges. The air hangs heavy, tasting of damp earth and rusted chains, as though each breath is drawn through the lungs of the building itself. From the vaulted ceiling, water drips in a slow, patient rhythm into a shallow depression in the floor. It has dripped so for longer than the memory of any man now living. Its pace does not change for kings or wars. It counts only the passing of its own time. The torch in my hand fights the dark like a cornered animal, its glow clawing at the stone walls. On those walls, I see what remains of the hands that once lived here. Lines carved into the mortar, some counting days, others forming the outlines of crude saints with hollow eyes. Others' faces left half-finished, as if the carver's hand had been taken before the work was done. The air smells faintly of burnt oil and rope. A rat scratches somewhere unseen. Its claws make a sound like a quill across parchment, but this is no story written in ink. Behind me, the iron door groans closed, its hinges shrieking against the silence. The sound lingers, curling into the corners before dying away, and then the quiet grows so deep that it feels alive. Here, silence is not the absence of noise, it is a presence. It stands in the room like an unseen figure, waiting. In the dimmest corner, beneath a broken archway where the mortar has cracked and flaked away, lies the shape. It is no longer whole, yet it endures. A frame of blackened oak, swollen at the joints from centuries of moisture, bound still by iron rivets that have eaten themselves to the color of dried blood. The wood bears grooves where fingers have clutched and clung until skin tore. No name is etched upon the stone beside it. Such names were not written where eyes could see, yet it once carried a title spoken only in whispers, in the same tone a man uses when cursing the devil. The smell here never leaves. It is the scent of rope that has known flame, charred just enough to carry a ghost of smoke into every crevice of the room. It has seeped into the stone itself, becoming part of the breath of this place. Once, long ago, this chamber was not a crypt for dead wood and rusted iron. It lived. There were footsteps on its flagstones, the firm, measured steps of guards taught to keep their faces still, and the dragging shuffle of those who entered with their eyes cast down. Some came muttering prayers in Latin, others spoke in the rougher tongues of the lowborn, and sometimes there was no voice at all, only the breathing of the condemned, quick and shallow as they crossed the threshold. The stone remembers it all. Stones remember better than men. This was the castle's hidden court, the court that bore no banners, no blazoned shields, no watching crowd. Judgments here were not shouted from the gallows. They were given in the dark, behind locks and keys, where the law had no need to show its face. Not every sentence here ended in death. Some ended in a confession, and confession was never asked for in words alone. There were interpreters of truth in this place. They did not wear robes or carry the scales of justice. They were made of iron and oak, of rope and pulley, of ratchet and crank, and they spoke in the language of pain. A century past, this device had a keeper, a gaunt man with wrists like the thin sticks children gather for kindling, lips pressed into a straight, bloodless line. He could hear the difference between the groan of wood under strain and the hum of hemp drawn tight. He could tell by the pitch of the sound how much more the prisoner could bear before words spilled like water from a cracked jug. In his own mind, he was no cruel man. His life, he told himself, was one of service. His duty was as sacred as the knight's sword or the priest's chalice. The crown demanded answers, and he was the hand that fetched them. What he believed mattered less than what the king believed. When the wind moans in the corridors above, it finds its way down here through cracks and vents, brushing past my ear like a ghost searching for the living. The torch in my hand sputters, shadows leaping across the walls until the device itself seems to move. Its shadow stretching like a black arm across the floor, reaching toward the rusted chains on the far wall. Dust floats in the air, not falling. Quickly, but drifting like ash after a fire has gone cold. It softens the edges of the stone and wood, but not the memory they hold. This is where we begin. Not with the men who wore crowns, nor with the soldiers who guarded gates, nor even with the priests whose blessings fell like coin from a trembling hand. We begin with the silence that follows the turning of a key in a lock. Silence here is never empty. It is filled with the sound of breath held too long, the murmur of prayers that may never be heard, the faint tightening of rope as it coils around its prey, and when the silence does break, it is with a sound that clings to the soul like frost on a window. The stone keeps that sound. The stone does not forget, and as I stand here, it feels as though the stone waits for me to hear it too. The stairwell coils downward like a serpent, its limestone skin slick with centuries of damp and the quiet whisper of decay. Each step carries the cold press of history beneath a traveler's foot, the echo of leather and chain multiplying into a chorus that belongs to no one alive. Torches, set in iron sconces, like the claws of some patient predator, hiss as they breathe the heavy, moist air. That air is thick with the scent of mildew, stone sweat, and the faint metallic ghost of blood, lingering in the corners as though the walls themselves remember every cruelty. Shadows leap and twist across the damp masonry, dancing to the rhythm of the unseen, their movements slow and deliberate, unhurried by any mortal urgency. Above, the castle is a different world, marble and mortar, banners that catch the wind, tapestries woven with the pride of dynasties. Here below, the grandeur is stripped away, revealing the raw, aching anatomy of stone. The walls sweat moisture, cracks spiderweb-like scars, patched by hands that never saw sunlight. The mortar is rough and pitted, not polished, not heralded, but alive with the memory of labor, of hands that worked in silence, and sometimes in fear. Every irregularity in the stone is a word, every damp corner a whispered warning. Even the air seems reluctant to rise, curling in low clouds, thick with the weight of unspoken confessions. At the stairwell's end, a door witzer, sentinel in oak and iron, scarred by tools, teeth, and time itself. It stands as though it has seen the entirety of human frailty, yet does not judge. It waits for the next to pass, just as the guard who once held this post waited, eyes averted, heart tempered by the monotony of witnessing rather than acting, the hands of authority bound by ritual and instruction. The guard's silence was a shield. He did not choose who would suffer, only when the passage could be permitted. Inside the room contracts, the air thick and clinging, carrying the weight of damp stone and a chill that penetrates skin, marrow, and bone. The ceiling hangs low, forcing those accustomed to sunlight and open halls to bow, to move cautiously, to inhale in measured breaths. Here, intimacy with stone becomes a necessity, walls that could crush a man if his defiance grew too bold. The smell is pungent, an amalgam of rot, iron, and the faint residue of the men and women who once knelt here, each bringing their fear and their sins into this hidden chamber, and there at the center is the object that arrests the gaze, device of judgment and mercy intertwined in a single, relentless machine. At first, it is almost innocuous, a simple wooden frame polished smooth by countless hands. The rope, thick and unyielding, disappears upward into shadow, vanishing beyond the reach of ordinary vision. But the stillness of it is its warning. This is not an instrument meant to rest. Each groove worn into the wood, each subtle indentation is a story of endurance and despair. Each knot in the rope is a syllable of confession, a word that slipped from trembling lips, a secret forced into permanence by gravity and fear. The device waits in silence, a patient sentinel in its own right, as if it knows the weight of every life that has passed through its reach. Long ago, when the great hall above echoed with laughter and the clash of goblets, another music echoed here, lower, sharper, and infinitely cruel. The windlass groaned under iron's weight. Leather straps screeched against wood. The slow exhale of men forced to bend under the whims of law and custom became a rhythm, almost musical in its repetition. Breath came through clenched teeth. Prayers whispered into damp stone, and sometimes, if the walls were willing, screams that carried neither beyond nor away, but stayed to mingle with the moisture and shadow. No audience was present save for the jailer, whose duty was absolute yet never grand. He did not judge. He merely ensured that the machinery of justice or its facsimile ran as it had for centuries, exact and impartial in its way. Those who entered this room often bore marks invisible to the eye. Confession might save a life, but even spared, the body retained its evidence: a trembling hand, a hollowed cheek, eyes that had learned fear too intimately. Others were not so fortunate. They left only footprints in stone, echoes in the walls, and names that would never appear in heraldic scrolls or chroniclers. The castle above might have shone with the brilliance of candlelight and festivity, but below, every oath sworn, every loyalty tested, touched this chamber in ways the sun could never witness. Its shadow reached, subtly, into the marrow of all who walked its corridors. A draught coils through a narrow vent high in the wall, brushing the rope so lightly that it moves with the gentlest sigh. The rope swings with a kind of solemn patience, as though aware of its own history. Outside, somewhere above, the bell tolls the hour. Its sound is heavy, commanding, resonant, reminder that the world carries on, indifferent to the fates decided in darkness. And yet, down here, time folds inward. The bell is not a guide. It is a distant heartbeat, echoing into a place where men and women wait suspended between life and oblivion. In this silence, stories linger. The walls remember the voices that quavered, the hands that shook, the secrets that were surrendered into the embrace of shadow. They remember the weight of justice administered in absence of mercy, and the rare mercy that arrived only when a human heart, hardened by ritual, allowed it. The wood of the frame absorbs this history like resin in stone, and the rope, coarse, yet pliable, carries every tremor, every prayer, every plea that ever ascended to the rafters. Centuries fold over one another, and the present is always layered atop the past. A visitor today may feel the chill bite deeper than cold warrants, hear the distant drip of water as if it falls from the memories themselves. A shift in the air might suggest movement, though the room is empty, and shadows cling stubbornly to the corners, refusing to release their tenants' names. There is an awareness here, subtle but tangible, of those who have knelt before this device, of men and women who did not leave with their pride intact, who went to their end as one might surrender to inevitability. Some linger on the rope, tracing its fibers with trembling fingers, imagining the weight it has borne. Each coil is more than rope. It is a chronicle, a ledger of human desperation, a silent witness to the fragile balance of justice, fear, and survival. The wooden frame, smooth and dark, seems almost to breathe in recognition, accepting every touch as part of its purpose. It waits, as it always has, for the next story to be added, the next confession, the next act of submission, the next echo of fear above. Torches sputter and smoke curls lazily toward the vault. The smell of fire mingles with that of damp stone and iron, forming a perfume uniquely medieval, comforting in its familiarity, terrifying in its association. For here, light is a visitor. It arrives reluctantly and departs just as quickly, leaving the traveler to feel the darkness settle like a cloak, heavy and cold. Every step forward is measured, every breath considered, for the room seems to absorb both and return them altered. As if the air itself has memory, the device waits in patience that is almost divine in its cruelty. It has seen kings and peasants alike, their fortunes irrelevant to its purpose. Justice here is not tempered by wealth or birth. It is pure, mechanical, indifferent, and yet, in the stillness, there is also a trace of intimacy, a connection to every soul that has been touched by its presence. Those who descend these steps carry with them the knowledge that their stories are now part of a continuum, that they move alongside the echoes of every confession, every plea, every surrender that has occurred in this chamber since its creation. To stand here is to be measured against centuries. The cold seeps into bones, the smell of iron into memory, and the whispers of stone into the very marrow. One might imagine that the walls themselves watch, that the shadows conspire to remind the living of the dead, that the device at the center, silent and unyielding, is the fulcrum upon which countless destinies have balanced. The rope sways ever so slightly, and in that movement, one can almost hear a whisper. Remember, remember every moment, every fear, every surrender. Outside, the bell tolls again, its sound rolling through corridors and across courtyards, touching the sunlit world, oblivious to the chamber below. Down here, only darkness and memory remain. The air is thick, heavy, yet electric with anticipation, as though it knows that some story will be added next, that some hand will meet the rope, that another soul will kneel in silence, awaiting whatever fate history and the device have reserved. The centuries have not dulled its presence. They have sharpened it, refined it, until the room is more than stone and timber. It is a vessel for memory, an archive of fear and faith, of mercy and cruelty intertwined. Every wall is a palimpsest of humanity, every shadow a testament, every echo a sermon delivered in silence. The device waits, as it always has, and as it always will. It waits for the next chapter, the next passage into the unknown, the next soul braver, desperate enough to descend and to kneel. And when that soul comes, as all must, the rope does not judge, nor does the wood falter. They receive the weight of centuries, the whisper of stone, and the patient witness of darkness. The chamber exhales, the passage is complete. Above, life continues. Below, the room waits, always remembering. The door closes behind with a slow, deliberate thud, sealing the air until it seems to thicken, pressing against the chest with the weight of centuries. Each breath feels measured, reluctant, as though the room itself draws in the oxygen and considers who has entered and whether they are fit to stay. The torch in hand flares once, a sudden flare that throws jagged shadows across the stone, then settles into a trembling glow. Its light stretches over a second chamber, smaller, more intimate in its cruelty than the last. Here the walls are not merely stone, they are memory made manifest. Worn smooth by centuries of flesh pressed against them, the polished surface, a testament to pain repeated, ritualized, normalized. At the far wall stands a figure hunched, immobile, yet alive in its dread, like a sentinel carved of shadow. Its frame is low, unnervingly human in its outline, yet part wood, part iron, supported by legs driven into the stone with a permanence that mocks escape. Blackened edges mark the passage of fire flames that kissed it and left, leaving smoke and ash in their wake. Between its jaws, a set of metal teeth lies dull now, yet their intent remains palpable, a hunger not for sustenance, but for the surrender of flesh, bone, and will. This was the device known as the Maiden's Kiss, a name that whispers tenderness, yet delivers none. It was meant for hands, for fingers that dared to lift ink to parchment in secret, to forge a seal they had no right to steal from the purse of their lord. Each digit had its place, carefully measured and constrained, a small corridor of terror leading from wrist to joint to fingertip. A lever bross and iron, smooth with use, brought the iron teeth down in a measured, slow arc, cruelly calibrated, to allow words to spill before the final fracture, confessions bleeding from lips and knuckles alike. Kael records what survives of them speak in hurried script of scribbled names and hastened admissions. The edges of pages dark with the mingling of ink and blood, of fear and obedience. The jailer here was young, younger than the one who worked the upper chamber. His face carries no lines of age, but it is shadowed nonetheless, shadowed by the unease that settles into a man when his hands daily administer pain. He tells himself he serves the law, that the law is the servant of the realm, and in some quiet, almost hidden part of his mind, he repeats the mantra that it is for justice. Yet each time he touches the lever, each time the mechanism hums and shivers beneath his fingers, he feels the tenuous thread between his soul and God stretching, thinning, almost snapping. At night, when sleep comes, his dreams are populated by hands, dozens of them, grasping, reaching, twitching from darkness. Phantom echoes of those who once occupied this chamber. The scent here differs from the first room. Rope, tar, and the faint temps of human sweat linger in memory. But here, the odor is metallic, oily, preserved in the grain of the stones. Oil for the iron, the jailer would say, meant to prevent rust and prolong the life of the device. It has seeped into the walls, the floor, the wooden table where tools remain even now. Tools that bear silent witness, wedges and pins, small hammers with dented heads, each a vessel of sound once sharp. Now mute under layers of history, in one corner, stands a bucket, water stagnant and tinged green, reflecting the torchlight in wavering ripples when a draft moves through the room. The surface seems alive, disturbed, and for a moment, it is possible to imagine something beneath the water's dark skin, a hand, a face, a memory of the last moments endured here. Beside it, a wooden stool leans slightly, its legs uneven from centuries on an uneven floor. It waits, patient and unmoving, for a keeper who will not return, for a visitor who may never know the weight of what was done here. And yet, for all the absence of life, The air remembers. Those who pass through this chamber, historians, explorers, or wandering souls seeking the past, often speak of a sensation, subtle yet insistent, around their own hands. A throb, a twinge, as though the room remembers the fingers that suffered here, the ones crushed beneath the iron jaws. Phantom pain, some say, or perhaps a warning. The torch dims again, as if shy of illumination, and the shadows lengthen, pressing against the stone like waiting attendants. The maiden's kiss rests, asleep, yet not inert. It is impossible to know the last time it was used, and the castle itself offers no testimony. Years, perhaps decades, centuries even, may have passed, and yet the chamber continues, its silent vigil, its stone walls, cold and unyielding, hold stories in their poor stories of terror, desperation, whispered apologies, screams muffled by cloth or leather, the gasping confession of a hand sacrificed to obedience. Here, history is not read in books, but felt in the marrow, absorbed through the soles of the feet, the skin of the fingers, the tremor of the spine. There is a draft from somewhere, perhaps a window slit, perhaps the cracks in the ceiling. It carries the scent of the outer world, wet earth, iron-rich rain, smoke from distant hearths. It moves across the chamber, and the torch flickers once more. The metal teeth gleam in the wavering light, hungry and silent, and for a heartbeat, it is as if the room exhales. Not a human breath, not the wind, but something deeper, the memory of all who suffered, all who waited, all who whispered for mercy and received none. The young jailer traces the outline of the device with his eyes each evening, though he dares not touch it now. His hands remember the motions, the weight of the lever, the anticipation of resistance, the snap of a joint giving way, the wet, metallic smell of blood and fear. In his mind, he hears echoes, the scrawled confessions, the whispered lies, the prayer that no one else should enter this place. And yet it remains a paradox of absence and presence, a shrine to suffering that has outlasted both victim and executioner. The chamber is almost too small for the weight it carries. Standing within it, the walls seem to lean inward, pressing closer with each breath. Dust motes drift in the torchlight, spinning lazily, innocuous, yet somehow solemn, as if even the smallest particles understand the gravity of what has occurred here. Each crack in the stone is a memory, each worn groove in the floor a testament. The very air vibrates, subtly, with the echo of centuries. And still, there is a silence, deep and deliberate. Not empty, not simply the absence of sound, but a silence that has learned to listen, that has catalogued every shudder, every scream, every pleading gasp. It waits in patience, like stone and shadow, knowing that one day, another hand may reach for the torch, another eye may flicker in the gloom. The chamber does not move, yet it communicates. It teaches, warns, and remembers. Some nights, when the castle above is quiet, when the wind rattles, the shutters and the bells have ceased their tolling, it is possible to hear faint noises, a hinge, squeak, a drip of water, a groan that is almost human. One could believe the room itself shifts, settling deeper into its purpose. Visitors sometimes shiver and whisper, though the words are soon swallowed by the stone. They speak of cold that is older than winter, of eyes that feel upon them though none are there, of hands that brush their own in memory. The iron teeth of the maiden's kiss remain sharp in legend, if not in actual bite. Their memory is suffused into the castle's bones, into the scent of oil and metal, into the uneven wood of the floorboards and the hollow echo of a door closing. Those who have passed through, or perhaps only glimpsed the chamber from a distance carry a residue of it with them, subtle and insistent. A tightening of the palms, a recollection of pain that is not theirs. A question: what does it mean to witness suffering through centuries, when the witnesses themselves have long since returned to dust? Yet even in this place of cruelty, there is a rhythm, a dark poetry. The space teaches patience, the inevitability of time, the weight of choice. The hands that once wrote lies, that once lifted coin, that once signed their own fate in trembling ink, are gone, yet the chamber holds them still. Memory is not compassionate here, it is complete. The torch dims once more, and shadows curl like smoke around the corners of the room. The bucket in the corner ripples faintly, reflecting light in fractured patterns. The stool leans patiently, uneven legs braced for centuries. The device sleeps, but it is not inert. It waits in quiet expectation, for history to repeat itself, for human error to return, for the slow, deliberate echo of law and punishment to continue. And the chamber exhales, for perhaps it is the visitor, and in that exhalation, the weight of memory becomes almost tangible, pressing against ribs, shoulders, and the spine dot above. Life continues in its noisy, unthinking way. Bells toll, doors slam, the castle creaks with the passage of daily chores, the comings and goings of nobility and servants. But below, in this intimate chamber, time has another measure. Here, the past is never past. It waits, patient and unflinching. It waits, and it remembers. In its centuries of shadows, the chamber holds more than stone, and iron it holds fear, obedience, and the thin line between law and cruelty. Here, history breathes, darkness teaches, and memory endures forever. The torch gutters, and the maiden's kiss sinks into shadow. The air hums with quiet anticipation, waiting for the next trembling hands. When that moment comes, the device will wake, and the cycle will begin again. Outside, the castle stands indifferent. Inside, the chamber waits, oil, scented, silent, and patient. Always waiting, always remembering. The torch flickers in the passageway, and with each step forward, the air tightens. It is colder here, though no winter wind touches the stone. The chill is different, all dirkeried, not by the sky, but by the walls themselves, seeping into the marrow like water into cracked bone. The narrow arch behind is already swallowed by shadow, and the stones ahead seem to lean inward, as if they would close entirely should you linger too long. Your footsteps do not echo. The sound is absorbed, pulled into the damp glisten of the stone, as though the walls themselves are listening. The floor inclines downward, almost imperceptibly, a slow descent into a place that feels beneath time. At the end lies a round chamber, its walls curved like the inside of a great well. From above, a single slit in the ceiling allows a thin shaft of daylight to fall, ash-colored and lifeless. That light lands squarely on the thing in the center. Device, the heart of this place. It is wrought entirely from iron, blackened by years of touch and time. No wooden warmth softens it. No part offers comfort. A frame rises as tall as a man, its shoulders broad and unyielding. At its center sits a wheel, slick in places where hands and sweat have worn the metal smooth. Chains spill from its sides, hanging like streams frozen in mid-fall, their edges ragged from use. Beneath it rests a basin carved from stone, cracked and aged, yet cupped as if still prepared to catch whatever the device demands. They called it the confessioner's crown, not for ornament, but for its cruel shape, which bent a body in upon itself until voice gave way to agony. The chronicles say it was favored by those who prized not just truth, but submission. When it turned, the sound was said to rise through the slit above, curling into the courtyard where kitchen boys drew water from the well. They were told it was only the wind's complaint, or the great mill grinding its grain, but the wise among them never asked again. Once it held a knight, a man of silver spurs, bearing the king's crest upon his surcoat, who had ridden in the company of lords. His offense was neither theft nor murder, but a word spoken at the wrong table, heard by the wrong ear on the wrong night, a betrayal of allegiance not proven, perhaps, but believed by the one who mattered most. When they brought him here, he did not cry out at first. The chains drew taut, his body bent inward, the iron wheel groaned. The first sound from him was not a scream, but a deep, low rumble, as if the mountain itself had shifted a noise that seemed to make the torch gutter. When his voice finally broke, it carried not through the chamber, but upward, slipping into the open slit like smoke escaping a chimney. The courtyard boys heard it. They did not look up. He left this place carried by 4 men, wrapped not in the cloak of his station, but in a shroud no priest blessed. No mass was said, no candle burned in his name. The crown had taken its toll now. Centuries later, the iron blooms with rust. Orange seeps across its blackened skin like a slow-moving sickness. A single chain link sways in the draft, its clink, against the frame so small, so harmless, and yet herein this chamber it feels like the footstep of something unseen. The shaft of light above begins to dim. Clouds pass across the sun, and the daylight fades from ash to nothing. The torch breathes alone now, casting long, nervous shadows across the curved walls. The basin catches nothing but dust, and yet the room waits. It has the patience of stone, the memory of iron. Those who entered with pride left without a name. The crown does not discriminate, will hold a prince as firmly as it holds a thief. It will bend truth into shape, and shape into confession. Some say, when the wind is right. The slit above still carries the faint sound of the wheel turning. Others say it is only the castle shifting in its sleep. But those who have been here truly been here never mistake the difference. The torch flares once, then steadies. In the corner, droplets of water trace the stone, tapping a rhythm older than any chronicle. This is no place of trial, for trial demands witness. This is a place of conclusion, where stories are narrowed to one inevitable end. The slit above narrows further as evening deepens. The air thickens, the iron fades back into shadow, vanishing inch by inch until it seems it was never there. But it is, always here, always ready. In the hall above, footsteps approach, the measured pace of men who carry orders. The hinges groan, the torch wavers. Another shadow will soon descend the narrow passage, and the crown will wait no longer. And when that chain draws taut again, the courtyard boys will look at the sky and say nothing. It begins with a sound, not the clamor of chains or the groan of wood, but the faintest sigh of flame, a single candle fighting to live in a room that does not care whether it burns or dies. The wax trembles on its thin stem, the light slipping, unfolding against the rough stones. For a moment, it seems the cell breathes, the shadows leaning in as if listening. The corridor that brought us here still clings to the mind, the low arch forcing the back to bend, the head to bow as though in mock prayer. Along its length, iron hooks hang, each bearing something nameless, shapes half recognized, Their use is guessed only in whispers. A rod whose tip curves like a question mark. A length of chain ending in a blunt spike. A frame of steel that, when held in the hand, feels colder than it ought to colder, even in the warmth of human skin. One can pass them in silence, but the eyes always betray themselves, catching for too long on some detail they wish they had not seen. And then, at the corridor's end, the door. No hinges, no lock, just a slab of oak that remembers the battering of hands. It stands drawn aside, not open in welcome, but in command, the way a wound opens when cut. Beyond it, the air is still, untouched by the damp breath of the outer walls. It is dry here, the stones baked in centuries of human heat, human pain. The room itself is no wider than the reach of a man's arms. The candle sits on the floor as though even the walls refuse to bear its light. In the center is the chair. To name it so is to commit an act of politeness it does not deserve. Wide planks for arms, iron bands at their edges, legs rooted into the floor so they may never shift. The seat rises with hundreds of small point steel thorns frozen mid-growth, each eager to find flesh. It waits with the patience of a creditor, the stillness of something that has already fed. They called it the seat of thorns. It was no invention of passion or rage. It was designed in stillness, drawn in ink by hands that measured pain like a craftsman measures wood. Its purpose was not to break a man quickly, but to make him sit with himself until his own body betrayed him. At first, the spikes were almost nothing light, like winter frost brushing the skin. But the body has weight, and weight is treacherous. It presses, deepens, drives the steel farther in until every breath is a bargain and every heartbeat a hammer. Prisoners were rarely bound here. The jailer did not waste rope. He simply gestured toward the seat. They obeyed, for the room made them small, and the candle's light left nowhere to hide. They sat, and the chair became their captor, their judge, their sentence. The jailer himself was a man carved from the same stillness as the cell. He never raised his voice, not from mercy, but from certainty. Words spoken here were already answered by the chair. It was said his eyes were pale as morning frost, the kind that kills the last green in a field overnight. He had no need for cruelty. His work was already cruel enough. Some stayed in the seat for minutes, others for hours. All left changed. Not all left alive. Those who endured the longest were not the strongest, but the most stubborn, those who clung to silence as their last possession, knowing the moment they rose would be the moment they surrendered it. The candle sputters again. Wax overflows the dish at its base, spilling slowly, thick as blood cooling in the open air. The walls lean in close, and for a heartbeat, the cell seems smaller than before. Somewhere in the corridor, a chain trembles against stone, though no hand has touched it. The sound is soft, almost imagined, but in this place it is enough to quicken the breath. Above, far from this darkness, the castle dines. Goblets are lifted in toast, the sound of laughter spilling like wine onto polished tables. They know what is beneath them, or perhaps they only suspect, which is worse, for suspicion breeds the kind of silence that keeps the chair waiting, ready for whoever might be brought down next. And here, in the thin light, the jailer steps once more into the doorway. His shadow falls across the seat, long and deliberate. He says nothing. He has no need to. The candle shivers, and its flame folds lower, smaller, as if it knows it will not see the end of the night. Far away, beyond another wall, another door waits. And in that place, The air carries the sound of water, slow and steady, dripping onto stone. It is where we are going next. Past the cell of the seat of thorns, the air grows so still it feels as if the stones themselves are holding their breath. The corridor narrows until it is no wider than a man's shoulders, the ceiling low and curved like the inside of a ribcage, pressing down as though the bones of the castle itself have curled inward to protect a secret. The mortar is damp to the touch, beads of moisture clinging like the sweat of something alive. There is no torchlight here, only the faintest glimmer from a lantern carried far ahead, its trembling flame casting shadows that stretch and shiver along the walls, reluctant to guide the way deeper. Each footstep falls heavy, as though the ground resists the weight of the living dot. At the corridor's end stands a gate of wrought iron, delicate in its pattern yet strong enough to hold back more than men. Its lattice is a forest of crosses, edges dulled by centuries of fingers guards, jailers, priests pressing against the cold metal before peering in. The iron sighs faintly with each draft, as though whispering names into the dark. Beyond it lies a chamber where the shape of mercy has been rewritten into iron. The chamber is circular, carved from stone so old the chisel marks have blurred into the texture of time. Its walls are lined with shelves built directly into the rock, each holding objects wrapped in linen, shapes indistinct, perhaps relics, perhaps remnants, each bound against dust and memory. The air here is heavy with a scent that does not belong to the present, incense clinging stubbornly to the years, tangled with a sharper tang of rust and something older still, a metallic ghost that even centuries cannot quiet. In the center stands the angel's wings. Two curved arms of blackened iron rise from a base so heavy it seems anchored into the bones of the earth. They are joined by a gear whose teeth remain cruelly sharp despite the years. When the gear was turned, the arms would spread outward, not to embrace, but to rend. The name, Angel's Wings, was meant to mock the sinner's escape from sin. A reminder that no flight could carry one beyond the reach of the crown's will. The record's faded ink on brittle vellum speak of its use not on thieves or traitors alone, but on those whose defiance was spoken in words, or worse, in silence. Heresy, they called it. To speak against the church was treason enough, but to remain silent when commanded to confess was an affront that pierced deeper than a blade. The bishop's clerk would attend in full vestments, his eyes cast not on the condemned but upward, as if seeking to distance himself from the iron's work. He would murmur prayers into the incensific air while the gear turned below, each creak of the mechanism a verse in a liturgy of pain. Those who came here seldom left walking. By the end, their voices would fail them, their words falling into a broken language the living could not understand, a mixture of confession, delirium, and the raw music of the dying. Some spoke in tongues that had no place in their birthlands, as if the threshold between worlds had been crossed in the agony. Others spoke no more at all, their silence finally claimed by the chamber itself. Now, the angel's wings stand unmoving, their arms rusted half open, caught as if in mid-flight. A faint rattle of chains hums in the stillness, though no wind touches them. Somewhere above, a door slams in a distant hallway. The sound travels down the throat of the castle, echoing through the stones until it fades to nothing, swallowed whole. This place does not sleep, it waits. It has always waited once. A boy of 19 winters was brought here from the far western marches. His crime had been whispered in the markets long before the soldiers came. He had spoken aloud that the bishop's gold was stolen from the hands of widows. When the soldiers bound his wrists, he did not resist. When they placed him before the gate, he did not kneel. He looked instead at the wings and said nothing. That silence, they said later, was the loudest blasphemy they had ever heard. They took his name from him. In the records, he is only the miller's son. His hands, once scarred by honest grain work, trembled not from fear, but from cold. He stood barefoot on the stone, the chill biting into the soles of his feet until his bones ached. When they set the gear to turning, the incense burned thicker, masking the scent of iron and blood. The bishop's clerk read aloud from the Book of Kings, his voice steady as the wings pulled apart. The boy's eyes found the clerk's and did not leave them until his own body gave way. The walls remember his breath. They also remember the woman from the coastal town, accused of hiding forbidden scriptures in the lining of her cloak. Her voice had been her trade she sang in the harbour inns, but here she sang only once. A single note, held until it broke, rang in this chamber like the toll of a bell. Even now, if you stand close enough to the shelves, you might feel the air hum with its echo. The angel's wings did not choose their prey. They embraced all equally, the loud and the silent, the guilty and the innocent, the faithful and the faithless. Each one left something behind in the air, a layer of history that does not fade. The lantern's flame sways, and for a moment the shadows move like figures at the edges of sight. Some swear that in the dimmest light, the arms of the angel's wings shift slightly, as if eager to be called upon again. The chains tremble faintly, a breath caught in iron. The air holds its weight upon you, pressing until you feel the shape of your own bones, until you understand what it is to be measured, weighed, and found wanting. This place is not a ruin. It is not abandoned. It is a wound the castle keeps open, a reminder of the reach of law and the fragility of flesh. The wings rest now, but rest is not peace, it is patience. The kind of patience that can wait centuries for its next offering. And somewhere above, footsteps echo faintly. They are not yours. Through a doorway no wider than a coffin's width, the path narrows until even the breath feels too broad to pass. The stones sweat here, each droplet beading and falling with the patience of centuries, gathering in shallow, uneven pools upon the ground. The lantern's flame, held low, catches those beads, making them glimmer like 1,000 small, restless eyes that will not close. The air is close, not just stale, but heavy with the weight of 100 final thoughts clinging to the stone, like frost clings to winter grass. And then the corridor ends. The final chamber opens, not with grandeur, but with a breath held too long. The walls here are rougher, as though the mason's hands hesitated, carving not for beauty nor permanence, but for haste, for secrecy. The ceiling stoops low, its timbers blackened, not by fire, but by the slow, creeping stain of time, so dark. They appear carved from the night itself. There is no central device here. No wheel, no chair, no frame to speak of justice or execution. Instead, the room is marked by recesses in the wall's shallow hollows, each the size and shape of a human form pressed upright. Before each hollow stands a slab of stone, an iron bar fixed across it, ready to be lowered like a seal upon a tomb. The standing grave. No place in the dungeon was feared so much by those who survived its first hours. It did not break the bone, nor draw the blood, nor scream its cruelty aloud. It was patient, it waited. It used the prisoner's own body against itself, turning flesh and sinew into a slow and faithful executioner of the will. Here they would stand, hours folding into days, their spines bent by stillness, knees quivering under the tyranny of gravity. They could not sit, could not stretch, could not even slump without the iron pressing into the ribs. The stone at their backs would not yield, no matter how many prayers or curses it absorbed. Their bodies became the device, their breath the measure of time. The smell in this room is different. It is the stale damp of air that has known no current for months, perhaps years. It carries mildew in its undertone, and something else, faint but sharp, like the ghost of rusted blood. In the farthest niche, the mortar is stained in the precise shape of shoulders, neck, and skull, as if the stone itself has learned to remember. The jailers rotated prisoners here in pairs, so that no one stood entirely alone. But they were placed just far enough apart that their faces could not be seen, only their breath heard in the dark. Sometimes the breaths would quicken together, as if both were being visited by the same thought at the same time. Sometimes one would go still for hours, the silence heavier than any moan. It is said that in winter, frost formed along the bars, creeping inward until it kissed the skin of those trapped behind. On summer days, the air thickened into a swelter, so dense that each inhale felt like swallowing wool. Men begged here not for freedom, but for another device, something swifter, sharper, merciful by comparison. But the standing grave was not built for mercy. It was built for remembering once. Long ago, a boy of 19 stood in the third niche from the door. His name is not recorded. Perhaps it was never known, but his crime was whispered among the guards. He had refused to kneel to a local lord when ordered to. They called it insolence. He called it dignity. For that, he was brought here. On his first night, he whispered to the man in the next niche, asking if morning ever truly came in such a place. The man beside him did not answer. Only the sound of shallow breathing came, until, near dawn, even that faded. When the jailers changed their rounds, they found the boy still standing, but his eyes were on the floor, as if he could see something the rest of them could not. And then there was the woman, a healer from the villages beyond the forest. She had been accused of using herbs that spoke to the dead. In truth, she had only nursed a dying child whose family could not pay the tithe for the church's blessing. They brought her here on a day when the frost reached deep into the mortar. Her fingers turned pale, then white, then the grey of the stones themselves. She stood for 2 days, speaking to no one, until a jailer passed and heard her murmuring, a child's lullaby. No child had been in these chambers for a century. The lantern tilts. Shadows bend themselves across the walls, stretching into the niches as though eager to fill them. One can almost believe the air itself still remembers. The rhythm of their breath, the way a field remembers the furrow long after the plough is gone. And in this room, time becomes strange. A day does not pass as a day does in the world above. It unravels minute by aching minute until the prisoner no longer remembers the order of things. The bells above toll faintly. In this deep place, the sound does not ring, but rolls, like distant thunder. For the world above, it is vespers, the calling to prayer. Down here, it is merely the marking of another day that will not end. The keeper of these chambers, the last man to hold the key, once lingered here after the final prisoner was removed. He placed his hand upon the farthest stone, fingers, tracing the grooves where skin had worn it smooth. He bowed his head and whispered a word that no one heard. Then he turned the key, sealing the passage for the last time. Yet the room has not emptied. You feel it in the weight of the air, in the closeness of the walls, in the stubborn smell that no clean breath can erase. Invisible bodies still seem to crowd the space, shoulders pressed to stone, heads bent in the posture of surrender. The silence is not silence at all. It is breath slowed to nothing, the memory of footsteps on the stair above, the faintest scrape of iron against stone. And then, somewhere, perhaps only in the mind, comes the echo of a voice. It is not a scream nor a plea, but a question. How long have I been here? It could have been spoken last night, or 100 years ago. In this chamber, such things are the same. When the lantern's flame sways, its light bends toward the door as if eager to flee. Yet turning away is not so simple. Even now, as the stones drip and the shadows deepen, the standing grave waits not for the next prisoner, but for the next witness. For the one who will stand in the doorway long enough to feel the weight in their knees, the ache in their back, the press of the stone that has no mercy. The world above will change. Kings will die, towers will fall, the fields will yield and withhold their grain. But here, the posture remains the same. Upright, unmoving, waiting, and somewhere in the spaces between breaths, the dungeon remembers.